Hi, how's it going? I'm gonna keep this intro brief. I got my video card installed, yay! Which means I can access Adobe Premiere, which means I can edit up that review I filmed a while back. So I'm gonna do that. So this episode will be longer than the last few. But I hope it will be worth it because I'm reviewing some cool stuff with Achtung Cthulhu, and that's my intro for this. Nothing too terribly clever, I'm afraid. But I may do clever later. But right now, I'm just gonna hit you with the video. I'll talk to you in a bit. Hello again! Welcome to another episode of The Basics of the Game. I am here to talk to you today about a review, actually, of a product which should have over, hard to figure, somewhere, over here, somewhere, in one of these two spots, you will see an image of the books Achtung Cthulhu, which, that shows I'm a professional because I have images and shut up. Okay, so Achtung Cthulhu, kind of an interesting thing to review. I should lay down some groundwork. World War II was terrible for so many people. Now this sounds like, duh, everybody knows this. But I think most people today really don't have a picture of how terrible World War II was. And World War II was for not just, the European theater, but the Pacific theater. Not just the Germans were bad. The Russians, the Japanese, the Americans did some bad things. And, you have to look at history with a whole wide lens. And part of that problem is there's only so much horror that you can deal with. People don't spend every day reading about what was done at Auschwitz or on the Soviet front, the Eastern Front of that war. You don't read about the rape of Nanjing, and I may have mispronounced that, but the Chinese city that the Japanese soldiers showed up and killed and raped a bunch of people. You don't want to read about it every day. Horror in war is outstripping anything that you will see in a Stephen King novel. And yet, we keep returning to World War II as a source of adventure fiction, of, as a setting where often incorrectly painting clear good guy, bad guy roles makes it easy for you to have a pulp action adventure like Raiders of the Lost Ark, which everybody loves. It has its problems, and if you try and break it down on some critical levels, you could maybe find problem with the storytelling involved. But generally, everybody likes that movie. They like the story. It's a pulp action adventure story. The Nazis are bad guys. Indy is a good guy. You gotta love that. There is a lot of story to be had in the World War II setting. Most of it ignores the horror of war, which is both a good and a bad thing. People find entertainment out of it, and they found entertainment in the war periods throughout most of the histories. I mean, most of the really famous stories in history involve some kind of war along the way. Odyssey, the Iliad, things like that. So, you know, it's part of our human character, it's part of our storytelling tradition. So, of course, we like to use it in our games. All right, fine. That preface put out there, Achtung Cthulhu takes World War II and puts an overlay of Lovecraftian horror over the top of it. Now, Lovecraftian horror, for those of you who are not familiar, is based off of the very influential works of Philip Lovecraft, Howard Philip Lovecraft, or H.P. Lovecraft, depending on who you talk to. 1930s, he revolutionized the field of horror writing. Now, he, like playing games in war, can be problematic. He had some racist threads throughout his stories. There weren't a lot of strong female characters, but then again, in the 1930s, there weren't a lot of strong female characters in most fiction. It wasn't just him. Same with the racism. There were a lot of people that were racist back then. They didn't have the benefit of growing up watching Bill Cosby or what have you. The civil rights movement having actually managed to change the minds of a bunch of people. And so, you know, he wasn't that uncommon in that. You can't ignore it, though. You shouldn't ignore it. I'm not apologizing for it. It's more of a place it in context. It's still not a good thing. But his work, artistically, was very influential. Very well written, very interesting takes on horror, and most of the stuff that people may have heard of involves the word Cthulhu, which was an elder god that lay dead and sleeping at the bottom of the ocean, that may one day rise again and destroy us all, heralding the end of mankind. And most of Lovecraft's horror basically boiled down to that sort of thing. Think of it as well, if you've played Mass Effect, the Reapers are sort of the same idea. There are things out there in the universe that are vast and terrible, and they hate you. It's not so much an atheist view of the universe, it's that there may actually be gods out there, but you don't want to meet them. They're all bad for you. There is no good magic. So that has led to several games over the years. Call of Cthulhu being the most famous. Alright? Now, I've laid that groundwork. Achtung Cthulhu is a setting series. And when I say a setting series, it has game material, but it has it for two different games. It has it for Call of Cthulhu, and it has it for Savage Worlds. Now, Call of Cthulhu is a more traditional horror game. It does it really well. Savage Worlds is more of a broad, general game which does mainly adventure stuff well. So, when you're looking at this material, I'm going to recommend that if you're planning to have a high-action adventure Indiana Jones game, you might want to use the Savage World game rules. If you're wanting to do something terrible and horrible during the time of World War II, you might want to use the Call of Cthulhu rules, which are kind of designed to simulate the Lovecraftian stories, which very rarely ended well for the investigators. So, Achtung Cthulhu was kickstarted and has a bunch of books out for it. But the two main books that I've taken a look at and I'm going to talk about is The Keeper's Guide and The Investigator's Guide. The Investigator's Guide is the player book. This is the information that your players will want. And the Keeper's Guide is more for the Game Master, the Keeper. Now, so the Keeper's Guide is a much bigger book for obvious reasons. It has a lot more of the game mechanical stuff to it. It also has a lot more of the lore in it. When I say the lore, I mean the implied fiction of Achtung Cthulhu, the dark fantasy elements, whereas the Investigator's Guide has a lot more guide to real history, and that your characters would know, so that you can sort of fit them into the setting better. Where the Keeper's Guide lore is more sort of doled out like a campaign guide, the GM section, the Player's Guide. It's just the Player's Guide involves a lot more real world stuff that actually happened. Now, it's a well-written book. Both of them are well-written. The setting is interesting. They took a light hand to it. I definitely recommend, if you're going to be running it, that you read, in the Keeper's Guide in particular, an essay by Kenneth Haidt about dealing with the horror of the Nazis as relating to the horror of Lovecraft. It's tempting, and a lot of genre authors and TV show makers have gone the route of sort of blaming the terrible things that the Nazis did on the horrors of some terrible, possession, demons, things like that. Clearly, humans did those things. And you need to face up to that. You also need to face up to the fact that they are, in some ways, sympathetic characters. The Nazis had mothers and daughters and brothers and sons and husbands too. They weren't all, kitten-eaten evil. And even the ones that were evil were not often evil in their own mind. And they make a good point of that, and I was glad to see it. The production quality of the books is excellent. The books look nice. They look like dossiers often. They have lots of artwork, really good artwork, I will add, throughout them. The quality of the writing is excellent. The game material is pretty good. I mean, it's hard to say without an extensive campaign, and I haven't had a chance to run an extensive campaign yet, but it's good. It's a good, solid set of gaming material, a broad swath of things that you will need, not just here's the stats for these kinds of monsters, but also here's the stats for these kinds of vehicles and weapons and such that you might encounter in World War II. They give you advice on how to run things like a dogfight. That's an important thing you want to know how to do with a World War II setting. So, I mean, it's got a lot of system support that's well done. It's well written. It's clear. I think the biggest thing I can say in its favor is by the time I got done reading it, I kind of was like, well, now I want to go get the rest of the supplements. They have some extra guides out for it. There's one for the Pacific Theater. The Keeper's Guide and the Investor's Guide more concentrates on the Atlantic Theater. And it's certainly much more from a British perspective, which is not surprising. The publisher, Modiphius, is British. But they definitely go from the British standpoint. And the Pacific Guide gives you more details about the fight in the Asian theaters. I think that this is a book that a lot of people will enjoy. I'm definitely going to recommend that you go and pick it up. Now, you can get it through the usual PDF stores, and I'll include some links on the show notes. You can, I assume that it's available in print, and I'll provide the notes for that on there as well. Now, the things I might add at the end here, because I'm running long, so why wouldn't I add things at the end? Because I'm a crazy person. Anyway, the thing I'm going to add at the end is there are some genre touchstones to help you sort of get into the idea, and they include some of these in the book as sort of source material. I'm going to recommend that you track down a copy of a movie called The Keep, which is by Michael Mann, of all people, in the 1980s. And it was about a keep that the Nazis come across that is containing some Lovecraftian-style horror. It really is the perfect sort of source material for this kind of thing. Although, looking back on it now, it's really cheesy. Oh my god, it's cheesy. So, keep that in mind. And a book series that a couple of book series I've been reading recently might sort of relate to this a little. The Laundry by Charles Stross is... first off, it's a great series, but it focuses on British intelligence dealing with containing the Lovecraftian influences in the world. Now, it's a modern take on British intelligence, but it actually ties back to the World War II period quite a bit, in particular in the first book. And it gives you an idea of how that sort of thing gets handled on a secret level. So you might want to look at that as inspiration. Another one is the Milkwood Triptych by Ian Tregillis. I think that's it. Ian Tregillis. Which is English warlocks versus German super soldiers. With odd superpowers through strange scientific experiments. While it doesn't sound particularly Cthulhu-esque, it has a lot of horror elements to it, and it gives you a strong feel of how to handle genre crossed with World War II realities. And it might spark some ideas for you. Anyway, that's my read on Achtung Cthulhu, and I hope you find it useful. Go ahead and get it. I think it's pretty cool. I kind of want to run a game now. So, I kind of want to run a game all the time. I am a sad, sad gamer who doesn't get to run games near enough. And nobody loves me. Great. Anyways, go ahead and like the episode, subscribe, follow me on all the various social things, Tumblr, Google+, Twitter, what have you. And let me know if you can think of something you want me to talk about in the future. Or if you've dealt with running games in a World War II setting. Let me know what you think. Thanks.